People aren't like, I think I'm going to get anxiety so I can get out of doing XYZ. Not typically the way that it works. All right, hello everybody. My name is Dr. Robert Duff, aka Duff the Psych. I'm a clinical psychologist and a self-help author. And today I have a question from a recent comment on one of my videos. It's from Mukund P. Hopefully I said that right. And they write the question, Dr. Duff, is anxiety also an escape mechanism? Do people habitually take refuge in anxious behavioral patterns to avoid situations where they need to put in more effort or have courage? Does saying I'm anxious easily keep many uncomfortable situations or people away from us, just because we don't really want to put in effort dealing with them? Perhaps also draw some sympathy from people. Self-pity is convenient, right? So this is a good question overall. There's definitely within the question, just if I'm interpreting the way you wrote that correctly, definitely a lot of judgment behind that, saying that it easily keeps off uncomfortable situations, that it helps to avoid situations that require more effort, more courage. Let me put it this way. Anxiety is very, very rarely malicious. Somebody's not, intentionally having anxiety because they want to be able to get out of things. Now, there is a secondary gain to having anxiety, which does allow you to get away from certain things. But that's something that the person typically does not want, but it does maintain the anxiety. Avoidance is the fuel of anxiety. So anxiety basically is a part of your experience that has been developed through evolution to try to keep you safe, right? Comes from our like fight or flight response, back in the day when we were hunter gatherers, if we were out there, foraging berries and one of the bushes starts rustling, our anxiety is supposed to go, oh, that's danger. We need to be careful. It's supposed to elevate our heart rate, get our bodies ready for action so that if a predator jumps out, we can run away and, save our lives. But in these days, we have, relatively few situations that require that full fight or flight response. So instead, anxiety basically keeps us safe from things that we don't need to be kept safe from. In other words, it lies to us about the threats that we're facing, or it has us react to sort of imaginary threats that we create in our mind. And what anxiety wants you to do is wants you to avoid those situations. So if you have a bad feeling about going to the store, for instance, you feel like it's going to be too crowded, you're going to have a panic attack while you're there, whatever the case is, your anxiety is going to say, let's not go there. That's dangerous. Let's not go to the store. So it wants you to avoid. And when you avoid, you essentially feed your anxiety. You make that anxiety bigger. You say, okay, thank you for saving me. Here, have a cookie, get bigger. And so your anxiety really starts running the show instead of you being intentional about what you want to do with your life. So avoidance is definitely a huge part of anxiety. Now, I wouldn't say that it's a convenient thing. It's not like, oh, I can conveniently get out of this or get out of that by saying that I have anxiety. People are rarely malicious with their anxiety. But when you do have anxiety, when that's sort of locked in, when you have a strong generalized anxiety, avoiding things has the purpose or the benefit, I guess, of what you would call negative reinforcement. So negative reinforcement does not mean negative attention or something like that. Negative reinforcement means reinforcing. So increasing a behavior by taking away something bad. For instance, if you were to take medication for a headache, that's negative reinforcement. You're taking away something bad, which reinforces that behavior. So you're going to take medication again the next time you have a headache. In this case, the avoidance with anxiety is you're removing a potential bad situation and you're getting the relief that comes with, removing that potential bad situation, even if it's kind of an imaginary situation that you put in your head. So that reinforces the behavior of avoidance and you kind of keep doing it. And so it builds up into, a whole ball of anxiety. A good illustration of this is people who have what's called agoraphobia, which is where you have a hard time leaving your house. It varies depending on the person. Sometimes you can leave your house, but only with a certain safety person, like your mom or a partner. Sometimes you can't leave the house at all. Sometimes you can go just a little bit out. I've worked with people who can go only as far as like their front porch to start off with. And again, as you continue to avoid, it gets worse and worse and worse. So a lot of times people who develop agoraphobia don't start that way. They start being able to operate within the world wherever. Then maybe they have a panic attack when they're out at the store or at school or something like that, and they get really scared of potentially having another panic attack when they're out in public. So they kind of make their sphere smaller. They only stay, closer to home. Then it gets smaller. Then it gets smaller as the avoidance continues and continues until they're not really able to leave their house at all. So that's one illustration of how avoidance can, kind of support that anxiety and make it bigger. And then with the idea of, self-pity, getting compassion from people, with any sort of mental health difficulty, you do always have to think about what is the, quote, secondary gain. But you don't want to think of it in terms of, again, being malicious. It's not like somebody is setting out to get anxiety so that they can reap the benefits of it, because the benefits do not outweigh the costs. It's not like it's great to have anxiety. Do you get, sometimes more attention from it, especially if you're younger? Perhaps. Are you able to get out of some things that are very uncomfortable if you have an understanding family, or if you're able to practice that avoidance? Sure. But again, the person doesn't want to have to do that. So it's not like they're just trying to get away with murder here. They're struggling with a psychiatric symptom. And as a result, they're having these symptoms that cause them to avoid things, or there maybe is some secondary gain that supports it. So it's something you have to consider, as you're a treating provider, if you're a psychologist or a therapist, you have to consider all these aspects and address, both the direct symptom and sort of the outlying factors around the person, in their sphere, in their life, and how that contributes, areas where there might be secondary gain, areas where there might be things that are, directly impacting the anxiety. And so you have to take really kind of a holistic approach to it. But again, I want to stress, people aren't out there just trying to get anxiety because it's easy. It's not easy to have anxiety. It sucks. You have to process the whole world like twice, through your sort of normal brain and then through your anxious brain, and try to reconcile those. And that's exhausting. A lot of health complications can come from anxiety. It's not a fun thing. So people aren't like, I think I'm going to get anxiety so I can get out of doing X, Y, Z. Not typically the way that it works, but avoidance is a big part of it. So hopefully this answer helps to kind of flesh out those bits and help you understand the ways in which avoidance and negative reinforcement play into anxiety. So thank you for listening to the answer to this question. If you have a question, drop it in the comments below. Please consider subscribing, liking, or disliking the video as it applies to you, and I'll see you for the next one.